Hello everyone, welcome back to the Addicted Bookworm, where my addictions all over the internet. On this channel I do library book hauls, book reviews, both digital and physical, audiobooks, and so much more. Alright, so, hold on a second here. Alright, get my drink. Alright, so I have just finished listening to Chapter 2 of Amusing Ourselves to Death by Neil Postman. And I'm going to say that Chapter 2 was very interesting, to say the least. And kind of wonder what he would think about smartphones and all that type of stuff. And I don't remember what year he died. But anyways, so Chapter 2 was interesting. And what I mean by that is that there was a lot that was talked about. The chapter went close to about 30 minutes. And, I've done audiobook recordings of my own book, and I know that sometimes those videos can go quite a long time. So, he talked about a lot of different things that came from the book. And one of them was about, he made it very clear that in layman's terms, he's not bashing television. That there are some benefits to television, just like there are some benefits to smartphones and the internet being in your pocket, but that there's a lot more harm that's going on. And we can say the same thing about when television came around, and about how it transformed the lives of Americans. And we can say the same thing for the internet and for computers and for cell phones and all that type of stuff and everything. But one of the things that as I was listening to this chapter, as we get closer to like Chapter 3, kind of like this belief, and I know this to be true, about how our intellect goes down as we are using this technology and we use it for things. I remember back in the early, maybe mid-90s, when might have been close to late 90s, when we got our first computer. And, my mother went and bought it with her income tax return and all that, because she was able to draw it from me and my brother, because I was under the age of 18 and my brother definitely was under the age of 18. So she used her money to get, to do this, to bring a computer into the home. And about how it transformed our lives in like a lot of different ways, and how it was definitely a lot different than when we didn't have a computer. And if I really talk about every little thing that's in this book, it'll probably end up being a 2-hour long video, which I don't want to be a 2-hour long video. One of the interesting things that he says about how, like, television could have the ability to turn people against the Vietnam War or the Korean War, one of the two. And it did have that effect. It did have that effect. When people were watching the Vietnam War, people were very angry. And you look at, like, today, when you have video of, like, what ICE is doing, and the amount of anger that's coming from that. And mediums like television, then earlier was television, and then of course it's internet with cell phones and stuff like that. How the power of the screen, how it affects the human brain, and how it has the ability to rile up people. And this is one of the definitely huge reasons that I ditched social media, with the exception of YouTube, because there is nothing that I can do by myself for what's going on in America. So I stay at home and just let other people do it. But it's kind of interesting, if you go and look at prior to television, during World War II, people would go to the movie theater to see the news, what's going on over there in Europe, what's gone over there in the Pacific Ocean. And how it had that effect on people because it was visual, because you could see it. And technology has always had its good aspects and its bad aspects. For example, is prime example of the biggest thing that technology did in the last 100 and some years was the wireless, and how, especially in 1912 when the Titanic was sinking, and they used that technology. How many more people would have died if that technology had not been available? So that is the good aspect of it. But then of course you have the bad aspect of it, where people were now invested in what was going on in Florida, what was going on in Wyoming, what was going on in Maine, what was going on in Arizona, instead of being definitely more concerned about what was going on in their community. Another thing that he talks about, in it, is basically, the great manuscript writers, the people that would spend an entire year doing these really beautiful iconography, as I say pronounce it. I probably butchered it a little bit. And then how when the printing press took over, when the printing press was created, it kind of wiped those jobs out. You just imagine suddenly you don't have a job no more because of the printing press. And about how the printing press had a huge effect on things that happened 5, 10, 15 years after it was created. So yeah, technology, especially when we talk about technology that replaces other, earlier mediums of information, has an effect on people. You go and look at prime example of technology in books. So yesterday I started on that one book that I mentioned. And I started on I think it was the prologue. And I sat there on my tablet, on my reader, and I'm reading this book a little bit at a time. And you got this scene that it's interesting. It's I envision this scene in my head very quite clearly, which is the beauty of reading it very slowly. You can get the whole room. And about how there is this war, and these men have finally reached the guy, the final level, the final boss, and this man is just sitting there, and he has his fingers up against his lips, and he knows that his end is coming. And it's a very vivid image in my head about this guy who's very eloquent, and he's very educated. You can tell he's very educated by the words he uses, and the prose are just beautiful because he's talking about things that he knows to be important, and how he says basically that, that this is the kind of like honorable death that he wants, and he ends up getting beheaded. And even before his head falls, everyone's cheering and they're crying because they've been through shit. But when you talk about books and television and stuff, television and later on the internet is really great at giving you that image right in front of you, but books have the ability to convey something far more deeper. And so I'm sitting here and I finished the prologue of this man who got beheaded, and this big old speech that he gives to this guy who's about ready to behead him. And it's just an amazing scene that if I had speed read, I would have totally missed it. So I think there's like 54, 56 chapters in the book, and literally I'm just going to sit there like today I'm going to read chapter 1, and I'm going to sit there and I'm going to just slowly just read this chapter, and then imagine it in my head about these scenes and these characters and everything. And just how books as this medium that's been around for hundreds of years, hundreds of thousands of years, how it has the ability to convey an image much more powerfully than watching something on television. And how if you couldn't sit still, and I do agree with the author on this, if you couldn't sit still for any amount of time, there definitely was something wrong with you. And it's like today, with like social media and stuff like that, and I will probably mention social media several times during the course of me listening to this audiobook and doing these covering these up, and like, how did I feel about the book, about the chapter and everything. So you go and have these book influencers that buy all these books, and they're like, they're definitely, their attitude is like, oh, look at me, look how intelligent I am and stuff like that. And then you see how many books they read in like a month. Oh, I read 30 books this month, and they did not read those books. They did not. Because if you ask them to explain one scene in one book, they will not be able to describe that room or that event or whatever, because they either skip entire scenes and just read dialogue, or they do something else. But when you go and you sit there and you totally close yourself off from all kinds of distractions, you discover that you are able to absorb that information a lot easier. And you also don't feel like that you're the neighborhood dunce, to be clear on that. But I'm really enjoying this book a lot. My viewpoint is that if it doesn't grip me up like in one chapter, I'm not going to read it. But that's what I'm doing. It's like just taking this book nice and slow, and it's just wow. I mean, I'm literally like blown away about that particular scene. And I'm gonna be thinking about this scene for quite a long time. But getting back to the whole thing with television, and how television has this power that is now being usurped by by social media, you kind of wonder, how long will it be before it joins all the other technologies that used to be important. And probably how powerful television was. How powerful television was. What I mean by that is, even though we have televisions and we cannot possibly survive without our television, television has changed in the last 15 to 20 years. Now you can watch your Disney Plus shows on the television. It's like totally hooked up to the internet. I remember, I think it was back in maybe the late 90s. I don't even know when they put the V chip in. I'm pretty sure they don't have V chips anymore. But they used to have, if they don't have them anymore, then I'll use the word used to. But I don't know. But when they had V chips in there, V stands for violence. Okay? And so they had a chip in the television. And if you had children, you could set, like, oh, this is the rating that if I don't want my kid to watch this ultra violent, ultra sexualized show, the television won't let the child do that. And then of course that's how you get, like, you ever notice, like, the rating on the upper, I think it's the upper right hand side of the screen, and you're wondering, like, where in the world did that come from? It came from that. But probably the most powerful use of television was on 9/11. And it really spurred Americans' agreement to throw away their rights in name of security and everything. And so television, from my own personal experience, being a child of the 80s, growing up in the 90s, becoming a teenager / adult in the 90s and all that, I've seen how powerful television is. And television was just as powerful in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, up to the time when they started acting more like computer monitors than televisions, that they were just as powerful as the radio had been. And I mean, my CD player, I have a radio on it. I can listen to country music if I want to. I love country music. But the thing was, radio for a couple of decades was, like, so powerful, and it had such an effect on every aspect of the American life and everything. And even during the Great Depression, people took comfort, if they still had a house, in the radio. You had kids that would sit around it and listen to The Shadow and listen to Superman and all that type of stuff. So it was a very powerful tool. And then of course the television comes along, and I haven't mentioned this before. I'm truly sorry if I haven't mentioned this, but I do agree with him about how television has caused people's brains to decline. And I do agree with it. Oh boy, do I agree with it. But the decline that we're seeing now is much worse than it was when the television was introduced. And I believe the television was formally introduced to Americans, not in their homes, but during the World Fair. I think it was the St. Louis World Fair. I might be wrong. But anyways, so I just want to close this by saying that one of the, and I'll probably repeat what I said in the video about that I quit TikTok, was that social media has, I didn't say this part, has the ability to take you away from what's important, and takes you away from your books, and takes away from your family and all that type of stuff. But I think what I'm hoping to gain by finishing, by when I get to the end of listening to this audiobook, is a better understanding of what Postman was saying and how he was looking at it. He mentioned in the chapter computers. So computers were around, but they were more, for companies, or military. But this book is really interesting, and it's not a bore at all. I'm enjoying it. But yeah, so I am going to end it there, and I will see you guys in the next video.